The Corps of Royal Engineers, usually just called the Royal Engineers, and commonly known as the Sappers, is one of the corps of the British Army. It is highly regarded throughout the military, and especially the Army. It provides military engineering and other technical support to the British Armed Forces and is headed by the Chief Royal Engineer. The regimental headquarters and the Royal School of Military Engineering are in Chatham in Kent, England. The Corps is divided into several regiments, barracked at various places in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and around the world. History. The Royal Engineers trace their origins back to the military engineers brought to England by William the Conqueror, specifically Bishop Gundulph of Rochester Cathedral, a talented military engineer, and claim over 900 years of unbroken service to the Crown. Engineers have always served in the armies of the Crown. However, the origins of the modern corps, along with those of the Royal Artillery, lie in the Board of Ordnance established in the 15th century. In 1716, the board formed the Royal Regiment of Artillery and established a Corps of Engineers, consisting entirely of commissioned officers. The manual work was done by the artificer companies, made up of contracted civilian artisans and labourers. In 1782, a soldier artificer company was established for service in Gibraltar, and this was the first instance of non-commissioned military engineers. In 1787, the Corps of Engineers was granted the royal prefix and adopted its current name, and in the same year a Corps of Royal Military Artificers was formed, consisting of non-commissioned officers and privates, to be officered by the RE. 10 years later, the Gibraltar Company, which had remained separate, was absorbed, and in 1812 the name was changed to the Corps of Royal Sappers and Miners. In 1855, the Board of Ordnance was abolished and authority over the Royal Engineers, Royal Sappers and Miners and Royal Artillery was transferred to the Commander-in-Chief of the forces, thus uniting them with the rest of the Army. The following year, the Royal Engineers and Royal Sappers and Miners became a unified corps as the Corps of Royal Engineers. In 1911, the Corps formed its Air Battalion, the first flying unit of the British Armed Forces. The Air Battalion was the forerunner of the Royal Flying Corps and Royal Air Force. In 1915, in response to German mining of British trenches under the then static siege conditions of the First World War, the Corps formed its own tunnelling companies. Manned by experienced coal miners from across the country, they operated with great success until 1917, when after the fixed positions broke, they built deep dugouts such as the Vampire Dugout to protect troops from heavy shelling. The Corps has no battle honours. Its mottos, Ubique and Quo Fase Gloria Ducant, were granted by King William IV in 1832, signifying that the Corps had seen action in all the major conflicts of the British Army and almost all of the minor ones as well. The Royal Engineers Museum is in Gillingham in Kent. Before the Second World War, Royal Engineers recruits were required to be at least 5 feet 4 inches tall. They initially enlisted for 6 years with the colours and a further 6 years with the reserve, or 4 years and 8 years. Unlike most corps and regiments, in which the upper age limit was 25, men could enlist in the Royal Engineers up to 30 years of age. They trained at the Royal Engineers Depot in Chatham or the Remounted Depot at Aldershot. Honourable conquests and historical construction. Britain having acquired an empire, it fell to the Royal Engineers to conduct some of the most significant civil engineering schemes around the world. Some examples of great works of the era of empire can be found in A. J. Smithers's book Honourable Conquests. Royal Albert Hall. The Royal Albert Hall is one of the UK's most treasured and distinctive buildings, recognisable the world over. Since its opening by Queen Victoria in 1871, the world's leading artists from every kind of performance genre have appeared on its stage. Each year it hosts more than 350 performances including classical concerts, rock and pop, ballet and opera, tennis, award ceremonies, school and community events, charity performances and lavish banquets. The hull was designed by Captain Francis Folk and Major General Henry Y. D. Scott of the Royal Engineers and built by Lucas Brothers. The designers were heavily influenced by ancient amphitheatres, but had also been exposed to the ideas of Gottfried Semper while he was working at the Victoria and Albert Museum. Indian infrastructure. Much of the British colonial-era infrastructure of India, of which elements survive today, was created by engineers of the three presidencies' armies and the Royal Engineers. Lieutenant Arthur Thomas Cotton, Madras Engineers, was responsible for the design and construction of the great irrigation works on the River Cauvery, which watered the rice crops of Tanjore and Trichinopoly districts in the late 1820s. In 1838 he designed and built sea defences for Visakhapatnam. He masterminded the Godavari Delta project where 720,000 acres of land were irrigated and 500 miles of land to the port of Kokanada was made navigable in the 1840s. Such regard for his lasting legacy was shown when in 1983, the Indian government erected a statue in his memory at Dhaulaswaram. Other irrigation and canal projects included the Ganges Canal, where Colonel Sir Colin Scott Moncrieff acted as the chief engineer and made modifications to the original work. Among other engineers trained in India, Scott Moncrieff went on to become Under Secretary of State Public Works, Egypt, where he restored the Nile barrage and irrigation works of Lower Egypt. Rideau Canal. The construction of the Rideau Canal was proposed shortly after the War of 1812, when there remained a persistent threat of attack by the United States on the British colony of Upper Canada. The initial purpose of the Rideau Canal was military, as it was intended to provide a secure supply and communications route between Montreal and the British naval base in Kingston, Ontario. Westward from Montreal, travel would proceed along the Ottawa River to B-Town, then southwest via the canal to Kingston and out into Lake Ontario. The objective was to bypass the stretch of the St. Lawrence River bordering New York State, a route which would have left British supply ships vulnerable to attack or a blockade of the St. Lawrence. The construction of the canal was supervised by Lieutenant Colonel John By of the Royal Engineers. In 2007 it was inscribed as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, recognizing it as a work of human creative genius. The Rideau Canal was recognized as the best preserved example of a slackwater canal in North America, demonstrating the use of European slackwater technology in North America on a large scale. Lt. Denison was one of the junior Royal Engineers who worked under Lt. Colonel John By on the Rideau Canal in Upper Canada. Of note, Denison carried out experiments under the direction of Lt. Col. By to determine the strength, for construction purposes, of the old-growth timber in the vicinity of B-Town. His findings were published by the Institution of Civil Engineers in England, who bestowed upon him the prestigious Telford Medal. Dover's Western Heights. The Western Heights of Dover are one of the most impressive fortifications in Britain. They comprise a series of forts, strong points and ditches, designed to protect the United Kingdom from invasion. They were created to augment the existing defences and protect the key port of Dover from both seaward and landward attack. First given earthworks in 1779 against the planned invasion that year, the high ground west of Dover, England, now called Dover Western Heights, was properly fortified in 1804 when Lieutenant Colonel William Twiss was instructed to modernize the existing defences. This was part of a huge program of fortification in response to Napoleon's planned invasion of the United Kingdom. To assist with the movement of troops between Dover Castle and the town defences, Twiss made his case for building the grand shaft in the cliff. The new barracks, a little more than 300 yards horizontally from the beach, and about 180 feet above high water mark, but in order to communicate with them from the centre of town, on horseback the distance is nearly 1.5 miles, and to walk it about 3/4 of a mile, and all the roads unavoidably pass over ground more than 100 feet above the barracks. Besides, the footpaths are so steep and chalky that a number of accidents will unavoidably happen during the wet weather and more especially after floods. I am therefore induced to recommend the construction of a shaft with a triple staircase, the chief objective of which is the convenience and safety of troops, and may eventually be useful in sending reinforcements to troops or in affording them a secure retreat. Twice's plan was approved and building went ahead. The shaft was to be 26 feet in diameter, 140 feet deep, with a 180 feet gallery connecting the bottom of the shaft to Snargate Street, and all for under an estimated £4,000. The plan entailed building two brick-lined shafts, one inside the other. In the outer would be built a triple staircase, the inner acting as a light well with windows cut in its outer wall to illuminate the staircases. Apparently, by March 1805 only 40 feet of the connecting gallery was left to dig, and it is probable that the project was completed by 1807. Pentonville Prison. 2 Acts of Parliament allowed for the building of Pentonville Prison for the detention of convicts sentenced to imprisonment or awaiting transportation. Construction started on 10 April 1840 and was completed in 1842. The cost was £84,186 2d. Captain Joshua Jebb designed Pentonville Prison, introducing new concepts such as single cells with good heating, ventilation and sanitation. Boundary commissions. Although mapping by what became the Ordnance Survey was born out of military necessity, it was soon realized that accurate maps could be also used for civic purposes. The lessons learnt from this first Boundary Commission were put to good use around the world, where members of the Corps have determined boundaries on behalf of the British as well as foreign governments. Some notable Boundary Commissions include 1839 Canada-United States, 1858 Canada-United States John Hawkins Re, 1856 and 1857 Russo-Turkish Edward Stanton Re, 1857 Russo-Turkish John Simmons Re, 1878 Bulgarian, 1880 Greco-Turkish John Ardar Re, 1884 Russo-Afghan Thomas Holdick Re, 1894 India-Afghanistan Thomas Holdick Re, 1902 Chile-Argentine, 1911 Peru-Bolivia. Much of this work continues to this day. The reform of the voting franchise brought about by the Reform Act demanded that boundary commissions were set up. Lieutenants Dawson and Thomas Drummond, Royal Engineers, were employed to gather the statistical information upon which the bill was founded, as well as determining the boundaries and districts of boroughs. It was said that the fate of numerous boroughs fell victim to the heliostat and the Drummond light, the instrument that Drummond invented whilst surveying in Ireland. Abney Level. An Abney Level is an instrument used in surveying which consists of a fixed sighting tube, a movable spirit level that is connected to a pointing arm, and a protractor scale. The Abney Level is an easy-to-use, relatively inexpensive, and when used correctly an accurate surveying tool. The Abney Level was invented by Sir William de Wellesley Abney, who was a Royal Engineer, an English astronomer and chemist best known for his pioneering of colour photography and colour vision. Abney invented this instrument under the employment of the Royal School of Military Engineering in Chatham, England, in the 1870s. Chatham Dockyards. In 1873, Captain Henry Brandreth Ree was appointed Director of the Department of Architecture and Civil Engineering, later the Admiralty Works Department. Following this appointment, many Royal Engineer officers superintended engineering works at naval dockyards in various parts of the world. Chatham Dockyard. Chatham being the home of the Corps, meant that the Royal Engineers and the dockyard had a close relationship since Captain Brandreth's appointment. At the Chatham Dockyard, Captain Thomas Mould redesigned the iron roof trusses for the covered slips 4, 5 and 6. Slip 7 was designed by Colonel Godfrey Green Ree on his move to the Corps from the Bengal sappers and miners. In 1886, Major Henry Pilkington Ree was appointed Superintendent of Engineering at the Dockyard, moving on to Director of Engineering at the Admiralty in 1890 and Engineer-in-Chief of Naval Loan Works, where he was responsible for the extension of all major dockyards at home and abroad. Trades. All members of the Royal Engineers are trained combat engineers, and all sappers and non-commissioned officers also have another trade. Women are eligible for all Royal Engineer specialities. All sappers train as military engineer, combat. Sappers then qualify as an air conditioning fitter, electrician, general fitter, plant operator, mechanic, plumber, bricklayer, plasterer, painter, carpenter and joiner, fabricator, building materials technician, design draftsman, electrical and mechanical draftsman, geographic support technician, survey engineer, armored engineer, driver, engineer IT, engineer logistics specialist, amphibious engineer, bomb disposal specialist, commander engineer, diver, parachute engineer or search specialist.